Hello and welcome. She's been a practicing architect for the last 22 years, designing a number of buildings in the United States and Japan. And she used to spend time in Japan for 7 years, designing a number of buildings in many cities across Japan. And we are lucky to have her in the studio today because she just flown in for a holiday and we are catching up with her in the studio. Her name is Mira Locher. She's the author of a new release called Zen Gardens, the complete works of Shunmyo Masuno. With me in the studio right now is Mimi. Warm welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Good to have some time with you.
It's great to be here.
First, Mimi, I have read your book. It's very interesting. These Zen Gardens, as featured in this publication, are designed by one of Japan's leading Zen garden designer, who happens to be a Zen priest as well. That is quite unusual for me. I thought only lay people can do the design. What can you tell us about the relations between Zen Gardens and designer who are Zen priests?
Yes, well, when Zen Buddhism became popular in Japan from about the 14th century, the first garden designers were Zen priests. They were the ones who were scholars and they had access to different manuals about garden design. Few written manuals, and then a lot was passed down by word of mouth, and they were the original Zen garden designers. And then now there are not many Zen priests who are garden designers. As a matter of fact, I think that Shunmyo Masuno is the only Zen priest who is a garden designer now.
Right. One of how many designers who are still priests?
Well, I think in Japan he's one, the only one.
The only one?
The only one.
He's still a practicing designer?
Practicing designer and a practicing Zen priest. He's the head of a temple in Yokohama in Japan.
What did tell us about the state of Zen garden design in Japan? It seems that the profession has been taken over by lay people, something like that?
Well, garden design in general is now a profession, a separate profession.
Right.
And so people study at the university to become landscape architects or garden designers. But typically they're not Zen Buddhist priests.
Yeah.
And so for Masuno, it was his I think his dream from the time that he was in junior high school to learn to design gardens.
Right. How old is he now?
He is now about, he's in his 50s.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's still young and quite vigorous and has many gardens to design ahead of him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. In this book you can see a number of Zen garden designs as featured in this publication, a dozen of Zen gardens, which are very beautiful and very steep in symbolism, I would say, because the gardens are associated with a number of concepts from Zen Buddhism. And my question is, when I take a look at these gardens, and you also mentioned in this book, there's a mention about empty space and silence, and I come across so many Zen gardens in Bangkok and beyond as well.
Yes.
They are very well organized, you see a lot of empty space, stillness.
Yes.
What is the concept that defines Zen gardens?
Well, the concept of emptiness is very important in Zen gardens. Emptiness, and then also the concept of transience or changeability. In Japanese, it's mujo, which is actually a Buddhist word.
Okay.
And those two concepts are both important in Zen gardens. Emptiness is important because you need emptiness in order to understand yourself. This is how Masuno would explain it. And for him, when he designs a garden, it's a place for people to come face to face with themselves. So it's a place they can come and they can think and be very introverted, and the answers to the questions that they have inside, perhaps they can find. So if there's no emptiness, then there's no place for that to happen. So emptiness is very important in that respect.
So there's a lot of spiritualism going on in the design of Zen gardens, right?
And
how were you drawn into the world of Zen gardens in the first place?
Well, I lived in Japan for 7 years,
Okay.
and you can't avoid gardens in Japan. You know,
Right.
there are beautiful gardens in every city in Japan.
When was that?
In 1990 to 1997.
Mm.
And then I've returned every year
Right.
to visit, and I travel with students, so we visit many of the gardens. So I've come to know them pretty well through those multiple visits. But the gardens in Japan are, both the traditional gardens and some of the contemporary gardens are quite incredible, because they also incorporate this idea of mujo, or changeability, transience, and especially with the changing of the seasons. So the gardens are designed so that the concept of emptiness is always present, but the garden itself changes, in a sense, changes around the emptiness of the garden.
Right, right.
So certain times of the year, some flowers may be blooming, or the leaves on the trees are changing color, or even in the passage of 2 minutes, the wind blows and the shadows change. And Shunyo Masuno talks about how he designs and thinks about how the shadows will change when the wind blows, or how the light will change over the course of a year, or how the garden itself will change through the flowers and the greenery.
Right, right. Very interesting concept. But tell me your first impression when you first step into a Zen garden in Japan. What sort of emotional impact that the garden had upon you as a person?
Yeah, you know, my very first experience with the Zen garden was before I first went to Japan. I saw a picture of a garden, and I thought, I have to go there. I don't know why, but I was drawn to it. And then when I was able to visit Japan for the first time in 1989, when I was a graduate student in architecture, and I visited the gardens, I was so surprised by their complexity on one hand, but also their simplicity on the other hand. So they're very simple and straightforward, but there are many layers of things going on if you take the time to look at them.
Right.
And I was very taken by that.
Right, interesting. That seems to be the concept of yin and yang, you know,
Yes.
inside the world in gardens, where you mentioned simplicity
Yes.
and complexity,
Yes.
you know, coexisting
Yes.
in the garden.
Yes.
The relation between Japanese Zen garden and its origin in China, how much influence Japanese Zen gardens derive its inspiration from? You talk about modern Zen gardens and traditional Zen garden. Maybe first you need to address the difference between these two gardens, and then tell us about the components of Japanese Zen gardens.